Now introducing the Minor Wisdom Trio!
Minor Wisdom!
All right, ladies and gentlemen, hey. Got Jonathan Dorf on today. A lot of you know Jonathan from Texas Thespians or TXETA at festivals in the state of Texas. He is a playwright. He is the guy with junior plays and just an all-around cool guy, and clearly a New Yorker. Clearly, as most of you who ever talk to him, you know, he just exudes New York, right? And you'll hear it in this pod. So if you've never met Jonathan Dorf, I don't know what rock you're living under, but he's a wonderful human being that has just a great story to tell. A lot of information that you're going to hear in his story that he talks to me from this interview from a few weeks ago was news to me. I didn't know a lot of information that he actually talked about. So that was pretty freaking cool to kind of get to know him. I got to warn you, something happened in this interview that has never happened before, and that's like the audio just completely dropped out. I don't know why. I'll have a little interlude where I come in and sort of reintroduce the second part of the chat, but it's whatever, man. I don't know what happened. Technology is crazy. Speaking of crazy, so I am officially self-employed. And like I said last week, I'm overwhelmed by the amount of people reaching out every single day since I've been away from Covenant. Mind you, it's only been a week. I've received emails, phone calls from different directors needing small things all the way to designing a full show and building it. And it's flattering as all get out. And I'm trying so hard to make sure that I'm helping all of the directors that I can and ultimately all the students that I can. I want you to continue to call me. I want you to continue to hire me. I want you to know that I'm making a living doing this. So I'm trying real hard to make the price of my services reasonable for you, but also something that puts food in my kids' mouths and pays my bills. And so I don't mean to insult you if you think that maybe the price is too high, or maybe I don't really know what I'm supposed to be charging as far as the educational entity. I know what day rates are and I know all that kind of stuff, but that's not typically what you charge an educational entity. So, you know, talk to me about if you end up hiring me for something, talk to me about the price. If I send you an invoice for something, don't be afraid to be like, hey, we can't afford that, and we can negotiate and figure some stuff out. So I am my own person. I'm not, you know, I don't have contracts right now. I will because I'm going to need to. But yeah, let's chat, man. I'm so happy with how this has turned out thus far. And I know that it's musical season starting up, gearing up, and a lot of musicals happen in January. I went to 3 this past week. I went to see 2 for Tommy Tune judging. I'm not going to name what those are. And one of them was insane in a good way. The other one was a very good show, but one of them was just crazy insane. And again, not going to name the 2. I did go see Chicago at Travis High School. It is a Tommy Tune show, but I was not there to adjudicate. I was there to see the seniors. There were my freshmen when I was at Travis High School. So I was there to see some of those kids and see their final musical at Travis High School. And it was really good. They did Chicago. Seems like everybody and their mom's doing Chicago. But yeah, it was really, really fun. While I was there, a kid came up to me, this kid from Marshall High School, and was like, hey, I listen to your podcast. Just knew who I was. And I told the kid, I was like, you're not my demographic, but I appreciate you listening. And I said, if you want to be a theater teacher, it's the perfect podcast to listen to. But it was just kind of like, it's crazy. Again, part of the overwhelming element of things. Speaking of students, so I judged a lot. I think 50 things, IEs, this this past week between, I think I did audio design, sound design, I did some playwriting, and I did some film. And the thing I need to take out of all that I would say to teachers to tell their students is first of all, teachers, if you're not checking their work, you're doing them a disservice. That's number one. Number two, what I originally wanted to say was that the kids need to take more pride in what they're doing. And I don't think they truly understand what that means. And I think it's our responsibility to teach them what pride is, what it means when you put your name on a product and you represent that product. So, for instance, some of the audio ones, right? Part of the audio project, the IE, was to find some research, right? Do some research. One audio design, sound design, IE, for me, that I did research. The playwriting. The plays had extreme typographical errors. I don't know grammar. Plus, you can't really grade grammar in a play because what if that character is, a bunch of you say, "Oh, I did it good." That's not proper grammar, right? But that's how a lot of people talk. So I did it well, right? So I don't. When I was grading the plays or adjudicating the plays, I wasn't looking at grammar so much. Partially because I'm not the best person at grammar. I like to think I'm better than average, but I'm not perfect. But what I was looking at are spelling errors. There were tons of spelling errors and just formatting errors and all kinds of stuff that were in those plays that are easily fixable, And it goes a long way to being a better play. It still may not be a good play, but it's going to present better, right? It's like I watch a lot of Food Network and cooking shows and Great British Baking Show, one of the best shows on TV. Their presentation almost makes things sometimes taste better or just good. And so presentation is a big deal. And so, teach your kids to just have more pride in their work so that, it presents better, right? The last thing that I want to talk about before we get to Jonathan Dorf is that Texas Thespians is in San Antonio as I record this right now, and I'm going to be there next week. I'm going to be there Tuesday through Saturday, maybe Sunday. I might stay till Sunday. We'll see. But Tuesday through Saturday, I'll be there. And I can't tell you how excited. I was so bummed because originally I wasn't going. I wasn't going because Covenant's not going, and I was working for Covenant, and why would they go, or why would I go if they're not going? And so then when I decided to leave, I was like, well, I'm going to go to Thespians. And then my wife's job said, well, we need your wife to travel. That's the one weekend in this 6-month period that we need her to travel. And so I was real bummed that I wasn't going to get to go because I knew San Antonio wasn't a possibility. And so then we figured out that my mother-in-law is going to come in town, watch the kids, watch the dogs, whatever. And I told Amy, I said, hey, can I please come? This is way last minute. Please come Thursday through Saturday. And Amy Jordan is like, she'll work with anybody. She will. I don't know why she does it, but, she says, I'll figure something out. And so she did. And then I get a text that asked if I can come in Tuesday, right? I was like, I'm unemployed. I can come in Monday if you want. But anyway, so I'll be there Tuesday. I'm doing some stuff Tuesday up there. I'm going to help out Wednesday with the juniors a little bit where I can. And Saturday, I'm going to teach a workshop. So it went from not going at all to being very busy at least three of the 5 days that I'm there. So I'm real excited. I'm excited to see people. I'm excited to see a ton of people. I just love being in that environment. And I'm excited to see some of my students from Cooper, from Travis, from Dulles, or I guess I don't know too many from Dulles now, but I'm excited to see people, man. It's going to be so fun. So, stop me in the Gaylord, if you will. Maybe I'll be by the cupcake dispenser, grabbing a cupcake, although they'll probably be all gone by the time Thursday rolls around, because all the kids will be there Wednesday grabbing them. But I'm super excited. I don't think I've said that, and you can hear it in my voice. So yeah, there's that. And then right now, I'll just be honest. I don't have anything lined up for next weekend. I'm hoping to, as far as a podcast is concerned, I'm hoping to grab a few things at Thespians. I would love to, if you are a listener of this podcast and you either A, want to be on, or B, know some people that want to be on that'll be in Grapevine, hit me up. Tell me, hey, grab this person, or reach out to this person, because I will interview them. I'm going to bring my gear. So let me know, and I would be happy to have you on. Join my Patreon, buy a shirt. It would really, now that I need to feed my children, please buy a shirt. Now it's important that people buy shirts. Before it was just to pay like the annual fee of having this podcast. Now I really need you to buy a shirt, because like my kids eat a lot. So enjoyed this interview with Jonathan Dorf. Again, I apologize for some of the technical difficulties, if you will. But it is a longer one, but it's a really good one. And you learn a lot about a guy that you see all the time at these conventions and festivals, and a guy that's like beyond helpful with anything he can do within his control to help you get a play, or just give you advice about kind of what's out there. He's also a useful tool to have for your students to talk to. So, but anyway, enjoy this. I'm glad that I had him on. It's been a long time coming. But again, we're in episode like 200 or something. So have a great week. Enjoyed Thespians. If you went to San Antonio, I hope you enjoyed Thespians, and I hope you're listening to this on the way home. Bobby, I'm looking forward to seeing you, big boy.
I got started as a playwright when I was in high school. And I had, at that point, I was actually the school newspaper editor. We took a school newspaper that had fallen on sort of tougher times, and we resuscitated it a bit. And in the meantime, I was writing, in addition to that sort of work, I was doing poetry, I was doing short stories, I was writing songs. There was a teacher, in fact, a particular teacher, guy named Tom Williams, who was my mentor, and he was both the newspaper editor and the literary magazine editor. I ended up editing or not the editor, I guess he was the sponsor, and I was the editor. But so Tom kind of created a little community of creativity around him. And actually, I was probably the only student to carve out my own office. We actually had them come in and drywall it, and I had a back office in the newsroom. But at one point, Tom said to me, he said, "You've done everything else. Why don't you write a play?" And Tom had, I think he had gone to Villanova, which actually has a pretty strong theater program in the Philadelphia suburbs. And he had written some plays, and I think he'd even written maybe some kind of an opera. And so junior year, I had been reading a lot of Eugene O'Neill, because I think junior year was American Lit. And I had sort of gotten on an O'Neill kick. So I wrote a play called The Storm, which was incredibly derivative. But Tom managed to sort of strong arm one of the students. There was a student drama festival at the end of the year, and he strong armed one of the student directors into choosing my play. And so they put it up. And from that moment, the play was, it was sort of a bad Iceman Cometh ripoff when I look at it now. But it was amazing to like sit in that dark theater and watch people watching your show, and to be watching your show yourself. And from there, I enjoyed it so much that I decided to write a play that was possibly worse the next year. And it was that one, and I'm trying to remember it was called Death Without Parole. And it was basically a no exit ripoff. I had gotten into reading the absurdists at that point, and so this was my ode to Sartre, with probably a little bit of UNESCO kind of seasoned in for good measure. And I was actually in that play, and all of those people who witnessed that moment were forced to sign NDAs. No, it really wasn't that bad. Acting was not my thing. Uh, but I've been told, I've had friends who've tried to convince me to do some voice work or something. I don't mind doing a reading, but I think the stress of acting is definitely not something that I wanted to take on. That's a whole other animal. But at that point, I was definitely hooked, and I had been working on some other projects when I was in high school, and I was writing a lot of things at that point. I guess the beast had sort of been unleashed. And when I went to Harvard, the nice thing about Harvard, and I think it's changed, but at the time there was no real organized theater department. And as amazing as it can be to go to a school with a strong theater department, the problem can be, especially as an undergrad, and if the program is, we'll say, a strong graduate program, is that grad program or that organized theater program can actually choke off a lot of the space and sort of suck up a lot of the people. And so the nice thing at Harvard without a theater program is basically nobody was telling you no. And so I think I mounted something like 14 of my shows while I was there. And it was kind of a free for all. There was actually a lot of theater. We had something called common casting at the beginning of each semester where almost all the shows auditioned at once. So in the fall, that might be 25 different plays auditioning. In the spring, sometimes it was closer to 40. And you would basically, it would almost be like a draft, except sometimes, the super in demand actors would end up, being on 6 or 7 cast lists, and then they had to decide which ones they were going to do. But around my era at Harvard, had like Larry O'Keefe and Nell Benjamin, who went on to great writing fame as the authors of Legally Blonde, and Nell wrote the lyrics for Mean Girls, and she's an absolutely lovely person, and was a really great actress too. And there were a number of other really good folks. I actually overlapped with Matt Damon, who I saw do Burn This in the like Winthrop House common room. We had all these weird spaces, libraries, and they even used the Adams House swimming pool. And I was in the Adams House basement space where Bob Brustein, who was one of my sort of academic mentors. Bob founded the American Repertory Theater. Before that, he founded the LREP. Came to the show in this space. You would do shows. I mean, there would be like these giant poles in the middle of the audience area, and you had to kind of work around it. And I wrote some pretty weird stuff at that point. But I got to study playwriting with William Alfred, who wrote a gorgeous play called Hogan's Goat, which is written entirely in blank verse. And I also got to study with Adrienne Kennedy. And but Bill was really my first sort of serious playwriting.
So right about here is when I completely lost audio. We didn't lose a connection, just the audio dropped, and I don't really know what the reason was. Hasn't happened since, never happened before, but it happened here. So I apologize for not only the audio quality is going to change, but also there might be a little bit of repetition on what Jonathan was saying. So apologies for that. Not a perfect science, not a perfect world, but continue to listen to the rest of my chat with Jonathan Dorf.
So when I got to Harvard, one of the things that is amazing about Harvard is, at least at the time, and I do believe it's changed somewhat, there was no theater department per se. And as lovely as theater departments can be, and obviously when I went to UCLA for grad school, there was a very strong one, but they do tend to choke off the available space and people. And so if you want to do something outside of the department, sometimes that can be really challenging. So at Harvard, there was none of that. And it meant that it was this amazing free for all. Harvard has these residential houses. So in addition to the Loeb Drama Center, which was where the American Repertory Theater was in residence, and we had a couple main stage slots there, and then we controlled the Loeb Experimental Theater. There was also the Agassiz Theater, and then all these house spaces. And so I produced something like 14 different shows of mine when I was at Harvard, and I had spaces, everything from the Freshman Union to the Loeb Experimental Theater several times, to the Kronauer space in Adams House, which was basically a basement with 30 some seats and giant columns in the way of things. And it was also hot. uh, as an inferno in there sometimes. And the Mather House TV room, which was basically a giant room with a large television in it that we put up theater spaces in there. And we actually, the houses had their own equipment. And it was a really exciting time. And, it all started with something called common casting. And there would be anywhere from maybe 25 plays in the fall to 40 shows in the spring, and everybody was auditioning at once, and you had lots of super in-demand actors who would be asked to be in 5 or 6 shows. And I actually did once see someone turn around and be the lead in one play one weekend, and then pretty much the next weekend she was a lead in another play. She did Lion in Winter, and I forget what the other one was. Maybe it was like Top Girls or something. But it was pretty astounding what people could do. I don't know how they were managing to do all their classes, but sometimes I think we majored in extracurriculars. And I was on we called it the HRDC, the Harvard Radcliffe Dramatic Club board for a couple of years. I was the treasurer, and I got to actually supervise money. And it's a wonder I didn't run off to the Caribbean on a great vacation. But it was really fun times. And I overlapped with some amazing people like Nell Benjamin and Larry O'Keefe, both of whom were performers, but were also writing and have gone on to write Legally Blonde. And Larry wrote Bat Boy, and Nell was the lyricist for Mean Girls. And Matt Damon was there and did a show in the Winthrop House, I think Junior Common Room. He did Lanford Wilson's Burn This, playing Pale. And he actually was really, really good. And funny story, apropos of nothing, I actually knew Matt in school because he was dating the girl who lived directly above me in Mather House for quite a while. Though he ended up not staying with her forever, but he was a super nice guy and super talented. And so from there, I actually thought I was going to be a lawyer, though, still when I got to Harvard. And for that, the sort of first semester, probably harbored those ambitions. But my cousin Michael, who is actually a law professor at Cornell now, he was in his final year of law school, and I got to see Harvard's famous mock trial, the Moot Court. And I saw it, and I said, this was amazing. And Michael won everything in sight. And I said, I do not want to be a lawyer. And so that kind of propelled me into writing more theater. I was also doing some screenwriting at the time, and I had a couple near misses. Nothing quite landed in the screenwriting world, but I do enjoy that. And I've actually, in later life, gone on and made some shorts. But when I graduated, my plan was to move to LA. And my parents said, if you wait probably about 6 months, I could have my grandparents' car. And in the meantime, I got bored. And I wrote 3 schools, and I offered to do free playwriting workshop. And one of them completely ignored me. The other brought me in to do a guest lecture, which was really fun. And the other one, the dean of the faculty called and started talking about a job. Apparently, they had never had a dedicated drama teacher before. Productions were directed by the English department. And so I went in and I met with the headmaster, who had Harvard Magazine sitting on his coffee table. And it turned out he had gone to Harvard for his PhD and had actually lived in the same residential house years earlier than I did, but it was the same one. We were both Matherites. And I did sort of a 2-week workshop, and then I was hired, and I was there for 6 years, which was probably 2 years too long because I had always harbored intentions of going to graduate school. And so I had my contract for the 7th year, but I was also the head varsity tennis coach, which was super, super stressful. And at that point, by May, I wasn't eating well. I had had enough. So I went in, there was a new headmaster, and I just went in and I said, I can't do this anymore. And he let me out of my contract for the next year. And I spent a year freelancing and applying to graduate schools. And I was fortunate because at that point I had started to write plays for young people, because what happened is I would be at Haverford, which is where I was teaching, and I would pick a show, and then I would have some more people audition. I thought, well, I don't want to just turn them away. So I would write, we'll say, a curtain raiser, for that. And so I started to do that on a number of occasions. And so there are some of my plays which are still kicking around, which have their roots in the Haverford days. I ended up during my freelance year getting commissioned to write a couple of touring shows for Philadelphia's Walnut Street Theater, which is a huge theater company, and they have this great education department that tours two shows with their Haas Fellows or the Haas Acting Fellows. So you basically cast of four. So there's a play that's at Youth Plays called From Shakespeare with Love with a question mark. And I actually wrote that show for the Walnut as a four-person play, but obviously it has a larger cast than that. And in the school world, one can kind of unpack that. Simultaneously, I also got commissions and spent 3 summers at Choate Rosemary Hall's Summer Arts Conservatory. And Choate it's actually where Edward Albee went to school, and I think Glenn Close, maybe, and Mike Douglas. It has and JFK, so it has a very distinguished group of alumni, and they had an I.M. Pei designed auditorium or sort of performing arts center, which was beautiful, but when it rained, you would see all the buckets come out because as gorgeous as it was, it had plenty of leaks. And so each summer for them, I was commissioned to write a play. And a couple of those, in fact, including one of my favorites and the one that got me into vignette style playwriting, which is a lot of what I do now, came out of that period. And the one that sort of started it all is Dear Chuck. And that was originally a commission for Choate Rosemary Hall. And I had students who were anywhere from the age of 10 to 18. So I kind of had to write a play that would appeal to everybody. And I think it was either 29 or 31 people. It was a lot. And at the time, it kind of blew my brain out because I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what am I going to do with all these people? And how am I going to sort of keep them all through the show? And that was where the idea of writing these vignettes came to me, because it was the only way I think that show was going to work. And it was sort of a style that I really enjoyed. And it's not the only one that I've used since then, because I've certainly written a lot of other plays that weren't in that vignette style, but I really enjoy it for one acts. At that point, I'd been writing my grad school applications, and I got into UCLA, I got into USC. I had lived on the East Coast all my life because I'd grown up in the Philadelphia area, and I actually got into Temple Film School, and they offered me, it was the one film school I applied to, and Temple University in Philly has a really good film school, I think kind of known for their documentary work and their indie work. And I guess it was like the presidential fellowship, or, it was whatever their biggest money thing was. And at the time, because this is 2000, it was a lot of money. I would be getting paid to go to school, and I turned it down. And some part of me regrets that, and then a big part of me doesn't, because I ended up at UCLA and on the West Coast, where I've lived ever since. And that was a great experience too, in a lot of ways. I got to study with Leon Katz, who was sometimes called the father of American dramaturgy. Leon had been co-chair of dramaturgy at Yale, and he worked on Angels in America, and was just a brilliant, brilliant man. He lived into his mid-late 90s, and was sharp as anything right up until the end, and learned so much from him, just in terms of how to approach plays, and sort of learning how to meet a play where it exists, rather than trying to impose sort of my idea of what a play should be like on that play, which I think has been super useful in working with young writers or just working with other writers. But UCLA obviously forced me to come up with some output, but I was still kind of, at that point, I had gotten into writing more plays for young people, because I had sort of discovered, it's something that when you go to college, you really don't know that it exists unless you were in a thespian program growing up, and I wasn't. We didn't have that in my high school. And now, I go back, and when I visit my parents at Thanksgiving, I usually go to Pennsylvania Thespians and teach workshops. But it's something that growing up, it was a whole world that I just didn't know existed. And so now it's like there's this amazing world of all this high school theater going on and junior high theater and all these people doing plays. And obviously in Texas, it's a huge thing with UIL, but people really being pretty adventurous as far as, we'll say, what a middle school will tackle. And so that's been exciting. But I think for me then, so I graduated from UCLA in 2002, and I got involved with the Alliance of Los Angeles Playwrights, which is a service and support organization for playwrights in Los Angeles. But at that point, especially with the plays for young people, I discovered that there were these publishers out there and that maybe I should check this thing out. And so I sent, I had a couple pieces early with Eldridge, which I've since actually reacquired and brought back to youth plays. That was, in fact, it was from Shakespeare with Love and Dear Chuck. And I had some stuff with Brooklyn publishers, and then I discovered play scripts. And at the time, and the first piece that I had with them was probably Aftermath in, I want to say it was 2005. I kind of got in at the right moment. Play scripts really, I think, changed the game in terms of, having this really great website with long samples that you could read. And a lot of the legacy publishers, at the time, French or Baker's or Dramatist Play Service or Dramatic, they were sort of behind in that. And the Rand brothers really, I think, got in on the ground floor of technology. And I was, there's a certain amount of luck. I think there's luck that's involved in all of this. And I will digress to tell a story of luck. When I got out to LA, I was in, I don't know if you remember, there were these listservs that existed. They were kind of like the early, almost like bulletin boards, message boards, like a primitive version of them. And there was this guy who ran, it was more of a screenwriting listserv. He had a book about screenwriting, and I got in on this. And maybe because I was the only playwright he knew, but he referred me to the people at the writer's store, and they hired me to write this website called playwriting101.com. They own the domain. And then they introduced me to the people at Final Draft, the sort of preeminent screenwriting software. And Final Draft was working on this thing called Ask the Expert. And, it was basically part of the software. And they had these almost like a PowerPoint where somebody who was particularly well-versed in the craft, and they had screenwriting, and Sid Field did the screenwriting one. And I think Larry Kramer maybe did television, but I can't quite remember. And then I did playwriting. And it was sort of right place, right time. And it was really helpful, not necessarily from a playwriting standpoint, but kind of from my teaching, playwriting and teaching. And so shortly after that, I got that up, and people would start to find me online. So I got this email one day from these folks, and at first there was there was that scam going around online. It was sort of associated, kind of called the Nigerian scam, where you would get this email and they would say, so-and-so, the late so-and-so has died and they have $50 million. And if you give me all of your banking information, you can get a cut. I actually know somebody who fell for that, but and lost $1,000. But I got this email, and I kind of thought it was that, but it was actually legit. And it was from it was the National Cultural Foundation of Barbados. And they had found me online, and they wanted me to come down as part of the United States Cultural Envoy program. So it's basically, they requested of the US Embassy. And so for a month in 2008, I had State Department health insurance. And I was in Barbados. I was tasked with raising the level of writing on the island. And Barbados is this, beautiful island of, at the time, it was about 300,000 people, former British colony in the Caribbean. And I got to stay at a nice hotel, and I would teach adult classes, and I lectured at the University of the West Indies. and I got to judge the national arts competition. And I was there when Obama won his first term, and they have a big party at the U.S. ambassador's residence. And so this is majority Black country. And there I am at this party, watching someone who looks like them win the presidency of the United States, which was a really amazing moment. I also got to see the Phillies win the World Series, watching on this tiny Spanish language ESPN television. And then after that, people found me and they invited me to Singapore to teach. And I went to Singapore 3 different times. And this was all kind of the luck of like meeting one person, and you never know how that's going to go. But so that ultimately never land back at the original timeline, but this time I kind of did. So they were really taking off, and so I wrote a play about bullying called "Thank You for Flushing My Head in the Toilet" and other rarely used expressions, which it's gotten over 300 productions. But that play was sort of 2008, 2009, and then the one that really sort of I guess put me on the map and continues to keep me on the map is 4 a.m. And 4 a.m. it just booked its 600th production. And it's this play about a group of teens who are awake in the middle of the night at 4 a.m. And that resonated with people. And I eventually actually wrote a sort of standalone sequel to it called The Magic Hour, which takes these same characters and picks up with them a year later. And it's a couple of plays that I'm very proud of. And in fact, 4 a.m., I worked with Allison Wood, a composer, lyricist, and we actually turned it into a rock pop musical. And so when I signed the contract with PlayScripts, I kept the rights for a musical version. So that version is at Youth Plays, and then the other 2 are at PlayScripts. And then I continued to write, other plays, largely for PlayScripts. Had Harry's Hotter at Twilight, but then at a certain point, probably circa 2010, I was in a room, chatting with Matt Buchanan, who was a longtime friend that I had gone to Harvard with, who has a Texas connection because he had his MFA in children's playwriting, from UT Austin, studying, with Susan Zeder. And then Ed Shockley, who was a Philly-based playwright with whom I had run the Philadelphia Dramatists Center. And so I found this URL, youthplays.com, because we were looking for a way to amplify our work for young people. And I was like, this is a great URL. At that point, we started, and it was just Matt did a very rudimentary website. And he started, we put all our plays that were for young people up there. And so for probably the first year and a half, it was just the 3 of us. And it was, our way of saying, hey, we're here, because it was starting. I think that the field of young people, especially with play scripts, more people started to discover it. And so there are more writers, I think, writing in that world than there were. At a certain point, we started taking on some other people. And then more and more other people, because you felt like, initially when I went to some conferences, and we didn't have that much stuff because we had our stuff and we had a few other things. And so there was this kind of race to reach critical mass and to have enough shows so that we had viable options for people, that if this wasn't your thing, maybe this thing over here would be your thing. And then, gradually it just kind of snowballed to the point where we're actually closing in on our 600th play. And we take, a lot fewer shows at this point than we have to be really picky, which we always tried to be. And that was one of the nice things I felt like about our company, is that we had all people who were, we had a lot of MFAs, people who felt comfortable doing dramaturgy. Most publishers, they either take it or they don't. And I have friends at other companies, and they're like, that's our thing. We either say yes or we say no. And we are trying to be better at just doing that, because dramaturgy is so much work. But we will take a play and give notes. In fact, a great example of that is play like Little Red. Little Red is this amazing Latinx punk rock musical, and we liked it. We thought it was really great, but we sent some notes, and they worked on it and came back, and we're like, this is even more great now. And lo and behold, it won the AATE Distinguished Play Award. And so that's the kind of thing we aim for. Unfortunately, Ed had a stroke. It's probably been 8 or 9 years ago, and so really, I when I go back to Philadelphia, I meet with him. We always go. We have our Indian buffet places that we like, and we go there. One of them closed during the pandemic. We were very sad, so we had to find a new Indian buffet restaurant, and there aren't as many as around the University of Pennsylvania, which is where we would go, as I thought there were. And then Matt sadly passed away, I think, in 2018. And that was a big blow. So I mean, we have different people formatting and proofing and reading, but it is kind of me as the last man standing of the founders, which has been challenging because I would like to write more. And I'm still, and one of the things that is funny because you sort of mentioned to me, like, I'm the guy with the scripts, and sometimes kids will come up to me at, we'll say, Thespian Festival, and they'll say something like, "You write plays too?" And it's like they have no idea that I used to write all these plays, and I want to go back to that. I mean, it's not that I'm not writing; I absolutely am, and like currently, the sort of latest couple things that are soon to arrive or are arriving. I have a new play called The Throne Room, which is a play set entirely in bathrooms. And, or I guess it is all in bathrooms or about bathrooms. And, but it's not it's not like people think. I mean, that could, there's a lot of, like, it's just sort of life happens in bathrooms. There's studies that say that we actually spend over a year of our lives in the bathroom. And so, if you spend that much time in the bathroom, things happen. So it's kind of a trippy little play. It's a vignette style piece. Originally, when I created it, and we had the first production at a school in California, in the sort of LA area, and it was a longer iteration. It was probably 65, 70 minutes, but I feel like the play wants to live in that 40 to 50 range. So my goal is to, it's probably going to be closer to 50. I had a reading, I did a lot of cuts. But I think they were all cuts that I felt I could live with. I think a lot of them made the play better, as often happens. But I think I'm going to have probably a few scenes that will be optional, so that if you need to be under 40, you can be. That's the goal. And then Youth Plays is putting out a new collection. We collaborated with University of Central Florida and what originally was Orlando Repertory, and I believe they're now Orlando Family Theater. I'm not 100% sure on the name, but a collection of teen mental health plays. They're plays not written by teens, they're written by some amazing professional writers from all over the country, but for teens. And so I wrote a play for that collection called Phoneless, and it's kind of a magical mystery world where everybody wakes up and their phones are all gone, and the phones have actually basically their gadgets have run away, like they are sentient, and they have left the people, and so it's kind of the search to find them, and then to find some balance in how we interact with them. But there's a lot of really interesting pieces in that collection, because I think that mental health is obviously a huge thing. I mean, even now in these current days, because we're talking, in the midst of the attack on, innocent Israelis, and then, innocent Palestinians are also in the crossfire, and it's a very stressful time for everyone. And so I think mental health more than ever is important. And the collection is going to be called Pieces of Mind, Pieces, P-I-E, CES, but also a play on peace of mind. So, working on that, but I'm also working on a superhero play, and I have probably 5 or 6 plays behind those that I'm ready to write. So it's It's just how can I find that time? And I think it's getting more people involved on the youth play side with tasks that don't necessarily require my attention, because it's easy to allow that to take up a lot of my time. And because I'm sort of obsessive about quality control, to want to have my fingers in every pie, and I just can't, because I'm happier when I'm writing. And so I had a great lunch with a dear friend, Valina Hazu Houston, who we publish and teaches playwriting at University of Southern California, and wrote a wonderful play called Tea, and in a whole bunch of other plays. We publish a play called Hula Heart of hers, and the Matsuyama Mirror, and then we have a 10-minute play of hers in our All of Us collection, which is our BIPOC collection. And Valina and I were talking about work-life balance, and it's so important. Or in this case, for me, it's sort of work balance, but writing versus sort of the other stuff you do. And I also do a lot of script consulting for other writers. Which is one of those things that playwriting101.com and the Final Draft thing have allowed me to do. So I've been fortunate. I've consulted for playwrights and screenwriters all over the country, and even worked with the Blue Man Group, doing consulting. So that's been a fun gig, but it's still not it keeps you from writing.
So I wrote down quite a few questions. The first thing that popped out to me was almost right at the top when you said, as a junior, you read Eugene O'Neill. And I wasn't introduced to Eugene O'Neill. Well, I was introduced to him in high school, but we didn't really read anything about him or read his plays until college. That stuff is really difficult. Did you struggle with content that was a little, different, if you will? That's kind of an elementary way of explaining Eugene O'Neill, but did you, or was that something that just kind of came to you and you understood almost right away?
Well, one of the advantages, my father was a librarian. And so I was the kid. When I was, I guess, let's see, I was 10, we did this cross country trip, and I would, sit on the back seat of the car, and like we would have to stop because I had run through all the books that we brought, and so we would have to restock. And so I was always very fortunate that writing stuff. I always I read at a level that was a little beyond my age. O'Neill is there's no getting around it. O'Neill is a bit of a slog. It's like stage directions for days. But I was working on, as I recall, like we each had to do sort of a report on some notable writer, kind of it wasn't like, it was, I don't want to call it a report. It wasn't like the sort of just the life of Eugene O'Neill, but like you had to dive into their work. And, so I probably read Long Day's Journey, and I read Iceman Cometh. And I feel like I read, at some point I read Yui, and I saw Wilderness. And we had some great theaters around, and my parents had lots of theater subscriptions. So I was, I fell asleep on Broadway when I was probably 5 years old. So I was really blessed. Philly was not that far from New York, and we could go up and do that. I saw, Dracula, I saw Grease, and then I saw some Shakespeare that I'm sure was completely over my head as a young child at that point. I feel like it was one of the history plays, like one of the Henrys. But so O'Neill was, he was certainly dense. And obviously, when I came back to him in college, I'm sure I got a lot more out of it. But I was able to kind of work my way through. And then I went into, obviously, O'Neill was sort of a hardcore kind of naturalism, and Long Day's Journey is so interesting because it's it's an autobiographical play, except for the fact that he switches out his name with the name of his dead brother, which is a really interesting and dark choice. But from there, I kind of jumped over to the absurdists, who were almost like the polar opposite, because you've got all this sort of naturalistic stuff, and now you've got all this, I'm reading The Bald Soprano and things like that that are completely the opposite. And I mean, obviously, kind of part of the point of UNESCO was to write stuff that almost sounded like nonsense. And he was very good at it.
So you mentioned going to be able to see plays. Was there a specific play when you were younger that really smacked you in the face?
That's a good question. I mean, I saw a lot of things, and when you're that young, you don't necessarily remember the specifics in the way that I did. I mean, for me, the play that really sort of smacked me was a little later. It was when I was teaching at Haverford, but I'd just gotten out of undergrad at that point. I mean, I started teaching when I was 22. I was barely older than some of the kids I was teaching, and Angels in America went on the national tour, and it came to the Annenberg Center, which was near University of Pennsylvania, and so I went with a few other faculty members and organized a group, and we had a few of sort of students who I thought could handle it, because obviously the subject matter is fairly edgy, and so everybody knew what they were getting into, and it was also a different time, and we were private schools, so and it was also sort of
Right.
even though we were somewhat conservative, but like probably, private schools, but still it was a relatively liberal Northeast. But Angels blew my mind, because it sort of expanded the possibilities of what theater could be and what theater could do, and to have, like an angel come through the ceiling, and in a way, it is kind of a vignette style piece. Like, it is a fairly fast paced thing, but to have kind of the magic, because you have characters, you have these historical characters, you have who were sort of, embellished somewhat, but still. Then you have these fictional characters, and then you have these absolutely fantastical characters, and to have them all merged. I mean, I think this play, and I remember, because we saw it all in one day. We went, we saw the first part in the afternoon, and then we went for dinner to Zocalo, this Mexican restaurant nearby, and then we went back. And in that, 6 some hours that we were in the theater, I looked at my watch exactly one time. Like, that's when you know that a play is successful, because you're just absolutely riveted by what they were doing. And also at the sort of similar time, Rent. And Rent kind of, we'd had Jesus Christ Superstar, but there was something about Rent that was different. And you really felt like you were at a rock concert. And I saw Rent 6 times. I saw it 3 times in Philly, and I saw it 3 times on Broadway. And I would always go with a different group of people. So I felt like they should have sent me some tiny portion of the royalty as a thank you. But, and there was something that was so alive about that show. And it's funny now because, sort of in hindsight, I think Tick, Tick, Boom is probably a better show. But there was something about Rent at that time that was the play, the musical that we needed in that moment. Also, something that blew my mind in terms of reading, though I saw a production of it that I did not think was as successful. But Jose Rivera's play Marisol, which, reads on the page is just like absolutely, just like bashes your head out with a brick. You have this angel who's like packing an Uzi, and that's just crazy. And, people turning into like a pillar of salt or whatever, like the man with golf club. Like, what a name for a character. And so, in some ways, I kind of miss seeing shows like that. And I was fortunate because I actually voted in LA's Ovation Awards, which was LA's version of the Tonys, for 15 years. And so I started in the 2004, 2005 season, and I was a voter pretty much up until 2021 when the awards imploded. It's kind of part pandemic and part some other stuff. The organization had kind of fallen on tough times in terms of staffing, and some stuff happened and everything just kind of imploded. But one of the beautiful things is you would get to see people doing incredible stuff, because LA is this incredibly, at least at the time, this very underrated theater town. I mean, people know Center Theater Group, in the Mark Taper Forum, because that's, we'll say, where Angels came from. And they know the Geffen Playhouse, and they'll know Pasadena Playhouse, but they're all of these 99-seat theaters. And people were doing just incredible things with tiny budgets, and actors who were basically volunteering. And I've had a couple shows out here. I actually wrote a one-man backyard wrestling play called Yard Wars that we did at a theater called the Secret Rose, in kind of a festival there, which was a really great time. And it's a play that I want to come back to, because I feel like I want to rewrite it. I feel like I know more now. I know a lot more about backyard wrestling, but also I just feel like, that play was written at a certain time, and that world has changed a little bit because of the internet and cell phones and all that kind of stuff. But so there was so much vibrant work that you would see things at Rogue Machine or the Road Theater Company, and it would, like, every play, like, I feel like every play I go to, I learn something, even if it's a bad play. Like, I think that's a really important thing for young writers to remember, is that every theater experience, and I mean, maybe I would draw the line at like a bad elementary school show, but like almost everything, there is something to be gained. And what I find for me is that even when the production itself isn't good, I find myself almost mentally reading the script while I'm watching the show. I feel like I'm seeing the play, the text behind the play. And sometimes it's really interesting, obviously, to read the show and then see the show, and to see how, the production may realize certain things in the text, or to see what choices they make, and to see, was that something that the author put in, or was that, their interpretation of it? Hopefully not an interpretation that goes against, what's obviously the author's intention. But, I think one of the things that I've kind of come to appreciate about productions, and I love seeing shows of mine whenever I can, so if something is nearby, I love to go see it. One of my still favorite plays of mine is a play called Rumors of Polar Bears, which is about a group of teens who are surviving in the aftermath of a climate event. And the play is kind of a designer's paradise, because it has kind of almost a Mad Max energy to it. So it's all kind of costuming choices. And the original one-act version, they created the set out of found junk. They went to, like a salvage yard and salvaged, and there's all kinds of lighting stuff. I mean, so you have all kinds of opportunities. And I loved, it was Claremont High, did it this spring, and I loved going out there. I actually had two different casts for it. So I went out and I saw both casts do the show, and it's so interesting to see those choices. It's also just really fun to see young actors out there. I love, just supporting young actors with work, and I also follow a lot of dancers. And I kind of would like to I did one show that was a commission for Coachella Valley Rep, which was a multimedia piece. It was about the work of, there's this amazing glass artist named Lino Tagliapietra. So he's the guy that Dale Chihuly says, this is the guy. And so they did a whole multimedia thing with Lino. And so I wrote the script for it, but we had original choreography, original dance commissioned for it, and original music commissioned, with people who were Tony nominees doing it. And it was amazing to watch that. And so I would love to collab, maybe with a dance department sometime, and sort of see what we could figure out that would sort of weave text in with dance. And I have an idea for play But it literally came to me yesterday, and I don't know enough about it yet, but I'm kind of eager to explore it and maybe see where that goes.
I want to got another couple questions for you. Um, I've got to find out where you get your motivation. Like, where do you get? You just mentioned that you had an idea yesterday, right? So it sounds like they just kind of come to you whenever. But do you find yourself finding motivation, or do you find yourself just you are a motivated writer and you just have stories to tell?
So, I mean, it's an interesting question. So, I would divide inspiration from motivation because they definitely. So, inspiration for me, to be honest, is pretty easy. I'm fortunate. Like at this point, I have 5 or 6 plays that I want to write. And sometimes it'll be, it's kind of like a what if this happened or what if that, and you'll have this, um, this thought that just kind of like pops in your head, and sometimes it's usually like a little kernel. I do a writing exercise in a number of my workshops. It's kind of stolen from Susan Laurie Parks, who did something called the 20 seeds, I think. And so I usually do 5 because, I have an hour or 75 minutes or whatever. So I don't have time to do quite that many seeds. But like a seed is like a little kernel of an idea. So it could be something as like a backpack lying on the ground, or a little boy who's dropped his ice cream cone, or where are the scissors? Um, True story. I keep losing scissors. So finally I bought like 3 pairs of them, and I just place them in strategic locations in the apartment. So they're always there, and I try never to move them. So the inspiration is the easy part. The motivation comes and goes. And part of the problem, and again, going back to that idea of balance in life is, with youth plays, eating up a lot of time. Sometimes, especially if I'm putting out fires, or getting ready to go to a conference where, we've got to get all these things ordered, and my person who usually does those orders is out of town, and so I have to do it, and so now I get to the end of the day, and I'm as you may have seen from my Facebook, I'm kind of a foodie. So I'm going to cook some meal. And then the question is, here it is, it's 8 o'clock. Like, do I really want to write at this point? And the answer usually is no. I am exhausted, and I, want to watch, the Great British Baking Show or something. And so, but what I do is, first off, I always sleep with a pad next to the bed. And I have learned the hard way that if an idea comes to me, I will turn on the light in the middle of the night, no matter what time it is, and I will write it down. And even if that means, for example, that I will write a whole scene in the middle of the night, I will do that, because I have learned from experience that I will not remember any of that in the morning. So strike while the iron is hot. The other thing that I'm starting to do, and I need to find more friends to do this, is we are basically setting up writing dates. And so my buddy Greg, who is he's actually working on a oh gosh, I guess it would be like a almost like a YouTube series. Um, I don't know if YouTube, but that kind of thing. And so we will write together in the same space. So we are sort of together. We're not writing the same things. I'm working on, with our sessions, I've been working on my superhero piece. I've been working on Cuts to the Throne Room. I've actually been working on a sort of vampire comedy film. Just getting the outlining together, because film is so much outlining. Like, it's funny with plays, I kind of just do maybe a note of some major events, and then I kind of let it go. Like with vignette playwriting, I will try to make a note of like what each scene is supposed to be there for, but then that's what I do. With screenwriting, I feel like I do much more extensive pre-writing work. But so we'll each write in that space, and we'll go for an hour and a half, 2 hours, whatever it is. And so for that time, I have somebody else to hold me accountable. And I think that that's the problem. It's not that you're not motivated in a sense, but you can't always overcome everything else. I mean, the best, honestly, when I was doing the most writing was when I was in undergrad, because I lived in basically a giant dorm. I mean, we called them houses, but they were dorms with dining halls. And we didn't have, at that point, the internet was not quite what it is now. We didn't have, cell phones, that kind of thing. So I would literally like shut off the ringer on my phone, let it go to the answering machine, because we had answering machines back then. And I would write like a 20-page play in a single day. In fact, I would write a screenplay. I would write a 100-page screenplay in a week. Like I did that. And I wish, I'm always in awe of my buddy, Don Zolaitis. And obviously like Don, wasn't running a playwriting organization for 17 years and isn't running a publishing company. And for a while, I was actually doing both of those things for quite a while. And so he can focus on writing all the time. And part of me longs for the days when I can do that. And at some point, maybe I will be able to. But in the meantime, I think, it's finding that balance, because I think that it's easy for youth plays to sort of expand into the available space.
So I want to get you out. I normally get people to give advice, and I'm not going to change that up with you because, this is a podcast for educators. So I try to do that advice for either educators or just students, for educators to take back to their students. So you can go about this one of two ways, your response, but for somebody breaking into the industry, now there are two sides to this. There are educators that are leaving the classroom or hoping to leave the classroom by producing more content, whether that be, acting in shows, and then there are some that are trying to just write plays and get them published. Or you can go the route of somebody trying to break in that is an 18-year-old going down either a similar path that you went or, something a little different, but kind of breaking into the world of playwriting and plays in general. What type of advice would you be able to give anyone, really?
Don't do it. Just kidding.
Yeah, funny. That's good.
It's funny because they tell like people who are going, want to be actors or whatever. They're like, if you can imagine yourself being happy doing anything else, you should probably do that thing. But I think that there's, whether you are a young, writer, because the beautiful thing about writing is that you can kind of write at any time, and it's like I don't see myself ever retiring from writing. So whether you are, just coming out of high school, or whether you are, an adult who's been in a career and you're, thinking of maybe switching gears a little bit, like kind of going on to a second act or a third act, I think that some of the advice is the same. First off, make sure, obviously, if you're a theater teacher, you're probably seeing a lot of theater and reading a lot of theater, but make sure you are, and make sure you're seeing, I would say, vary your diet. The best thing that happened for me, because when I was writing, reading a lot of Eugene O'Neill, I started to write like Eugene O'Neill, and then I read a lot of absurdists, and then I wrote like that. And so the more stuff that goes in, because you're kind of trying to find like who you are, and that requires sampling a lot of who other people are. And again, to go back to this idea that the more you see and the more you read and stuff that's out of your comfort zone, it is only going to expand your concept of what is possible. And it gives you ideas. Like as I said, I learn every time I see or read a play, and it doesn't have to be some spectacular, Broadway play. I think too often, actually, we get caught up in the spectacle of it all. I would actually rather, a lot of the time, and I say this as I'm going to Hadestown this weekend to catch the closing Sunday. It's at the Amundsen, but it's such an amazing show, and I think that it's such a theatrical show that I think that is, storytelling of the highest level. In Hadestown and that's kind of part of the thing too, is remember that your job as a playwright is to tell a great story. And however the method of telling that story, and whether that's with a whole series of vignettes that by the end we come to a certain understanding of whether it's thematic or there's a plot thing going on. It doesn't always have to be plot, but like let's expand our definition of what is possible, of what is a play. So I think that would be the first part of the advice. The second part of the advice, because I've seen writers do this speaking as a publisher, is don't try to triangulate what you think people want. Like, nobody knows really. We have plays that we accept that we think are going to do really well and kind of tank. And then we have plays that inexplicably, like we just like, wow, we took a chance on that, but we didn't see that coming. And so this idea of trying to write because you think this will be popular, it may not be. Like your first job is just to write a great show and to tell a great story. Now, obviously, if you're writing for the school market and you write a play that's got 11 men and 1 woman, good luck with that. There are some boys' schools out there that work with coordinate schools, but like that's your market. So it's not to say go in blind. And maybe I guess as the advice continues, it's like and another thing, but understand that playwriting, while it is an art form, it is also a business. And people often, and it's one of the reasons why I love sometimes doing, I do a workshop called Playwriting as You Like It, and I encourage people to ask questions about the business, like how to get published and things like that. Because understanding the business and that you're functioning in a business is really important. Because otherwise, if you just write a great play, it can be like that tree falling in the forest and nobody was there to hear it. And so it's important to understand what is that journey going to be like. As a student, I don't think that you have to study playwriting in an organized program in university, but I do think it's helpful to take a class or two. Learn what it is to write plays. As a teacher, I would say, don't be afraid to teach playwriting in your class, even if you don't feel qualified to do it. And I think that playwriting is one of those cases where so many people, if you're a theater teacher, you had lots of acting classes, you had directing classes, you know how to take apart a, light blindfolded with your pinkies or something, but you may feel really uncomfortable teaching playwriting because you feel like you're supposed to be the expert and you don't feel very expert. And so my advice to you as a teacher there is you don't have to be the expert. You are sort of leading the expedition, but you are all going into uncharted territory together, and you can get there together. And then, obviously there are resources out there to help you with that, whether that's somebody like me or Don or a playwriting book or something. But don't be afraid just because it's uncomfortable, because you've got all those different students in there, and some of them, the stages, they're like they want to be on stage and that's their thing, and somebody else wants to design, and somebody else is like, wow, I could move these actors around and I could talk to them and get a great performance out of them, and somebody else may be dying to write and they don't know that yet, and so you might be that person in the same way that Tom Williams said to me, you should try writing a play. And that's the reason I did, was because of that teacher in my junior year of high school. Otherwise, I don't know that I ever would have done that. And he was the one who kind of helped make that happen on stage. I think that was actually the first student written play that was done at my high school. At least that's the story that I've been told. So why not? I think we should be asking ourselves why not more often, in the same way, when I was a student in college and nobody was telling us no. So, like, let's not tell people no. Let's say, go write that play. And it might not be very good, and that's okay. A lot of my plays, like, and that I think is the other thing to remember, is if you have not written plays, like your first X number of plays will probably be terrible.
Right.
and maybe you'll write a good one. I've adjudicated playwriting at Florida Thespians for, I don't know, probably like half a dozen years now. And some of these students, I am amazed at what they write because they're much better than anything I wrote when I was their age. And I'm in touch with a few of them still. And I'm just like, wow, like you are so good. Like these could be, and we actually have, I mean, we have at Youth Plays, we have a young playwrights competition, and their plays, I mean, one play, the Exceptional Childhood Center, Dylan Schifrin wrote that. I think he was probably 16 when he wrote that, and you wouldn't know that it wasn't a play written by an adult. I mean, Dylan ended up going to Yale. He's kind of a genius, but that's like, you don't know who is lurking in your classroom, and when they discover that passion, they may write something that just kind of like melts your face. Maybe this is the last piece of advice to leave with is, once you write it, you need to get it read, get it up on its feet, because you learn so much more seeing that show. It's also incredibly addictive to be in that dark theater, watching the audience watch the play. And you learn so much about a play by watching the audience respond to it. You actually, you see where people are reading their programs or shifting around in their seats, where they're leaning forward, all that stuff. It's so important. But like, in order to be a playwright, I mean, you're a playwright because you say, I'm going to write plays, but now get those plays up there, because that will help you move to the next level.
Minor wisdom.